Spring is coming soon, very soon, which means that myself, Jacques, and all of you watching at Great Grow Along are gonna be getting out in the garden, which means we're gonna need to stay hydrated, which brings us to today's sponsor, Element. Well, what is Element? It is a zero sugar electrolyte drink mix, perfect for gardeners and anyone who enjoys the outdoors. I have been using it for about 6 or 7 months now. I love all of the flavors, but I love watermelon salt, citrus salt, or raspberry salt. Absolutely delicious, and they provide a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or any other dodgy ingredients, which is super important, especially if you're a gardener trying to grow your own food and know what's going into your body. Element is perfect for gardeners like us, specifically formulated for anyone on a mission to restore health through hydration. So 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium gets you the electrolytes that you need. And for you Great Grow Along attendees, you can get a free Element sample pack with your first order at drinkelement.com/GGA, which is drinklmnt.com/GGA. And of course, if you don't like it, you can return it for a full refund, no questions asked. The gardening season is kicking off in full swing, and if you want it to be the best year yet, as we always do,
that's always the goal,
then we're here for you. Kevin Espiritu here from Epic Gardening. I'm here with my friend
Jacques, the garden hermit as Jacques in the garden.
And we are out in my front yard in suburban San Diego, California, which is why we're in the real world. We've got some crazy winds going on. We've got a guy putting a roof up. We've got some crows in the air, so forgive us on the sound. But we wanted to talk to you guys today about some creative planting strategies that you might have heard of some of them. You definitely haven't heard of some of them, the other ones, but just really to jog your brain, to get you a little excited. You'll come up with something on your own after you hear these. And who wants to kick it off? I mean,
I'm just gonna kick it off by saying that the goal for this, at least for me, when I'm thinking of pairing my planting, is to try to avoid having only the same stuff in the same spot.
Yes.
Now there's always exceptions, like onions and garlic. I tend to just plant very tightly in clusters, but there's so much benefit from mixing your plantings in the garden. A lot of these plants actually pair off each other really well, and they give you way more of a harvest. So one of my favorite examples that I'll give you is lettuce. It is a very fantastic interplanting sort of companion plant because lettuce grows pretty quickly. It doesn't need much in terms of nutrients, and it is not very big. So what that means is that in the summertime, for example, I have my row of tomatoes growing. What I will do is take my lettuce transplants and put them at the base of the tomato plants. That way they get shaded by the tomatoes, protecting them from the intense summer heat. And I'm actually able to harvest lettuce out of my garden even in the middle of the summer, and it doesn't taste weird. The other time I've done this is actually right now in the winter. I planted all my cabbages. I knew my cabbages would take like 3 months.
Yeah.
The lettuce took like 2 months. So I planted it in between my cabbages, harvested out the lettuce. Then the cabbage really took over the rest of the bed. And how it's like I planted full-size cabbages and I never wasted any space.
Yeah.
So I got 2 harvests for the exact same amount of space, no loss at all.
I think that's one of the key ways to think about it, is playing with plant timings and saying, what can I do before this other thing I planted gets big enough to ruin my plans, right? Excuse me. So on the lettuce note, and I want to come back to the onions. I want to come back to the onions because I actually don't fully agree with you. I pop mine a little bit, but I'll talk about that in a second. On the lettuce note, I came up with something that I call the subterranean method. And you know, you always hear interplanting, plant spacing, biointensive, this and that. What about a method? I did it in this bed right here.
The vertical method.
Yes, I put some potatoes about a foot down here. And then I thought to myself, wait, this is going to take minimum 2 weeks to come up.
Oh yeah.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Right? Depending on depth and if they've been sprouting or not. So I said, well, I'll just put lettuce right above this with no regard to spacing at all, just right on top, right?
You didn't even know where the potatoes were going to come up.
I had no clue. And I said, well, even if the potatoes make it up in 2 weeks, they'll just sprout like right next to it or whatever. It won't be that big a deal. They still, once they come out of the soil, they still take another 2 weeks to probably set up proper.
Easy.
Right? Because potatoes, 90-day, 85-day crop at the fastest.
Yeah, most of that's like really at the back end.
Exactly. And so what happened is I got 3 to 5 heads of lettuce out of this bed, and literally to the day that I harvested them, potatoes were coming out. The subterranean method. So you can think in terms of vertical height. You can think in terms, what you said is the planting timings.
Yes.
So, and that's where my onion idea kind of differs from you, is I planted a patch of onions, like I have one right here, but I also just had more.
Yeah.
I just had more. I'd started a lot, and it's like we've said, you really, these staple crops, you don't want to ever run out of them. So if you have more, it's always good. You can always give them away, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I did is I kind of walked around the garden and I just pop and dropped onions in random spots. Like I thought it'd be fun to find an onion here in 4 months.
Yeah, it's kind of a surprise, right?
Yeah, and so I did it in my pepper bed as not really an inner plant, just like popping them in random spots.
Yeah,
I popped them in,
they worked really well.
like a veggie bed or a lettuce bed like this. And then for most of the summer, I would walk out and just be like, oh yeah, that one's, and here's the thing, they won't even grow sometimes perfectly optimal because maybe you didn't prepare the bed for it.
Yeah.
But I had a bunch of those more flat bulb style onions, like Cipollini style.
Oh yeah.
You know, pull a little guy up. It wasn't optimized. It wasn't maximized. It doesn't matter because I only needed like a little one for breakfast.
Yeah.
And so I think the popper strategy for onions, I like it for onions. I like it for green onions. I even like it for like a leek. I don't like it for garlic.
It is really good for leeks. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think that one's really great because it really goes towards getting the most out of the space you have. Like some people are blessed to have infinite amount of space, right? Even ourselves, we actually have a decent amount of space in our garden.
That could sometimes be a curse though.
Yeah, it could actually be, it really can be. But if you are limited on space, that's where it gets the creative thinking of putting things next to each other and just filling up empty spaces. I always like to start seeds throughout the entire year, even if I don't need them, because what might happen is maybe a plant gets destroyed by some pest, or you harvest it and you didn't think about it. Now you have those random transplants you could just put in your garden. You're not locked to strict planting, spacing, types of plants. You can mix it up and try different things in the garden. And actually, a very classic method that both of us still use is the multi-sowing method. And this is something that works great with beets and leeks, for example, are the two, and actually onions. Those are the three that I really think of. And all that really means is that instead of putting one beet seed, maybe you put 3 beet seeds, 3 leek seeds, 3 onion seeds, and you plant them all together in your garden. What happens is they all start growing. One of them will probably end up being bigger than the rest. Once that's at size, you harvest it. The rest of them can keep growing, and you could keep harvesting from that same patch, allowing them to get to the size that you want again, without wasting any space. It's actually even easier because now instead of planting 3 separate plants, you could plant them all at once.
Yeah, it's surprising how well it works because you would think, especially with root crops, that they would really interfere with one another. But what ends up happening, let's say you plant a beet in 3 crop, is they'll start to, they're circles, right? They're spheres. They'll start to kind of push each other out of the way on the surface, but the roots remain intact underneath. And so just like you said, I have a couple rows of beets in the back right now. And what we've done is we sowed them relatively densely, and then I take every other one out. So I actually just harvested some yesterday, and they're smaller. They're maybe like this big or so. Not huge, not at least to the potential of what that variety can be. Yeah. But that's okay because they're tender, they're young, they're nice and juicy and delicious for like a beet salad. And those bigger beets, I can just let them size up. I really like this because it saves you time too.
Yeah, I think in general, those root crops are really great for interplanting. I often put beets all around my other things, and it always does really well for me. Another one that I really like to do is actually peppers. And what I did differently this year with my peppers, which I think ended up working out, was I planted 2 peppers of the same variety, basically like 6 inches apart. It's like something cheesy. I've seen people call it like peppers holding hands. The idea is that peppers are actually one of those summer crops that prefer a little bit of shade. So if you plant 2 right next to each other, the same varieties, they'll help shade each other. The branches will help support each other. And even though they don't need it, it doesn't improve your pollination because they are technically a perfect flower, meaning they could pollinate themselves, but having more flowers around always helps. So that's been another one that I've really liked, is instead of putting 1 pepper and spacing out traditionally, I put 2 peppers and I space out maybe like 6 inches further than I normally would.
I tried the same thing last year and I would say it worked pretty well. You know, you're bound to run into aches and pains in the garden which is why I want to introduce you to our pain cream partner here at Epic Gardening, Nature's Willow. If you've seen Jacques, myself, or Epic Gardening at a gardening convention recently, we probably gave you a free sample, so let me tell you about it. So the secret ingredient of Nature's Willow is actually a natural ingredient. It is willow bark, or an extract of willow bark, so it doesn't use anything artificial. The compound in willow bark, called salicin, is actually the natural precursor to what we know of as aspirin, and when you partner that with the other ingredient, helichrysum's anti-inflammatory properties, you have a powerful 1-2 punch for pain relief. And it's perfect for gardeners because, first of all, it smells nice, it goes on easy, it's gentle enough for sensitive skin, but it's tough on the aches and pains you get from putting in a hard day's work in the garden. For me, I have issues with my right wrist and my right elbow specifically, which when you're doing a bunch of pruning or digging, you're using both of those joints a lot. So I like to rub it on both of those, and it helps out quite a bit. And thanks to Nature's Willow, the official pain cream partner of Epic Gardening, you're getting a 25% discount. You can use the link that's showing up in the chat right now, or go to natureswillow.com/discount/GGA25 to claim that discount. And now back to the video. Pepper method reminds me a lot of the orcharding technique of 2-in-1 hole.
Right.
Which I've done many times here at the homestead, for example, with the avocados.
Yeah.
I planted, I believe it's a Haas and a Fuerte, or a Haas
Yeah,
and a
they
Bacon.
pollinate each other, right?
In that case, you're right. It's an A and a B type for avocados, which means that, I forgot the order, but either the female flower opens at night or in the daytime based on either being an A or a B. So by having both, they're open all the time. Yep. So there's perfect overlap, and then you get good pollination.
Better fruit.
In the case of peppers, like you mentioned, that's not as important. It's a perfect flower.
Yeah.
It doesn't really need it, but it still works really well.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, you've mentioned before, sometimes I don't need as many hot peppers as I thought, or I don't need as many peppers as I thought. I like this idea for, let's say, a bell. You do it with a bell. Maybe you can prune out the interior so it doesn't get super crowded, but then you're taking roughly the same footprint of, I don't know, an 18-inch circle, maybe something like that, and you're getting not 3 to 5, you're getting probably 6 to 10. Yeah, and that's nice.
Yeah, I think it's a great method. I'll actually touch again on the tree method, because let's say you don't have that much space, like we mentioned earlier. Planting 2 trees in the same hole that can benefit each other can give you more access to different varieties. So for example, now you have 2 varieties of avocado taking up effectively half the space that the other, if you planted them correctly spaced.
Oh yeah, 15 feet apart, yeah.
Yeah, so you get more variety. You might get, like, instead of having double the harvest, you might get 150%. So like a little bit more, but not double. But now you have more variety, and you get probably better fruit in general anyway, especially if you don't have the space for it. And the same thing with peppers is you could gang up your planting like that, try more varieties, get better yields without necessarily getting too many of different things like that.
You know, now that you're saying it, another idea could be to say, I'm going to do bells in the 2-in-1, but I'm going to choose different varieties. Yeah. I'm going to do shishitos 2-in-1, different varieties, and you have a direct comparison of how those go.
Yeah.
It's kind of a clever way to think about it.
Totally fine. The flowers will cross-pollinate, but that'll only affect the seeds. This is like a common thing people talk about. You could plant your peppers next to each other. They're not going to change the fruit that you're eating. They're just going to change the seed for future fruit that you might grow.
Which even that could be a fun thing to try to grow out.
Really
but yeah, I would say common misconception in certain crops, cross-pollinating is bad that season. Like, let's say corn.
Yes.
Why though? Because what are you eating when you eat corn? You're literally eating the seed. You're eating the actual seed. Whereas with peppers, you're eating the fruit around the seed.
Yeah, so the corn, I wouldn't put 2 varieties next to each other for sure, because you're gonna put some really, unless you want to.
Frankenstein corn.
Yeah, if you want to, that's fine. But thinking of the fruit trees, one of the classic things, and this is something that I personally want to expand a little bit more on this year, is fruit tree guilds, which is an idea from permaculture. And the idea is that you have a fruit tree, it's growing above ground, right? And usually underneath it, there's plenty of space. So why not make use of that space? And a lot of common ones that I'm going to be trying this year are low-lying flowers, like maybe alyssum, lobelias. The other one is strawberries is a classic one, because they can actually root out and spread away from your fruit tree. They get all the benefits of the shade from the tree above. You're still putting plenty of water for the fruit tree anyway, so there's always going to be a little bit of spare for like the strawberry or any other low-lying plant, really. There's a lot of different options. You could even put fruit, other sorts of berries, but that's another great one where a lot of times people just feel like they can only put one thing in one place, and you're really limiting how much you could grow in your garden, how much variety you could grow, literally how many different plants you could fit. And it's just something that everyone should think a little bit more about. And
Yeah.
in fact, I think another great pairing is two of the exact same plants. And in this case, I mean, let's say you have two varieties of broccoli. Instead of trying to think like a professional gardener who is going to make sure that they have their succession plantings in a row, I could just choose a broccoli that's ready in 60 days, another one that's ready in 80 days, start them at the same time, plant them in my garden.
Yeah.
Now I get my harvest in 2 months.
100%.
And then instead of being like, oh shoot, I didn't start more broccoli, that's fine. Because in 20 more days, the next one's gonna be ready.
This is the thing I think is so underrated for myself, even 13, 14 years into gardening now, but anyone, especially beginners, is take away, at least for a while, the succession idea and just plant succession based on days to maturity. So the perfect example would be something like potatoes. The Brits do this really well with early main and late crop potatoes. They have a different phrasing for it than we do. We call it, we don't really have a name, I guess, for it.
Like early, mid,
But
late, I guess.
it's the same for tomatoes. I mean, some crops really don't have that much of a spread on the harvest
That's
time,
true.
but something like garlic does, something like tomatoes do. You can go glacier, 65-day tomato.
Did some
You
early
can go
ones.
110-day tomato. I don't know a variety off the top of my head that's 110, but there are them.
Yeah, for sure.
Potatoes come from about 80 to 120. And so you could just plant all your stuff at once, especially if you're in a tight season.
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about the succession. I think I was gonna say, as we kind of round this planting tips out, is adding corner plantings to beds
Yes.
is super underrated. I didn't do this for a long time because I was very much in the like onion maximization mindset of like put everything, just get as many as I can.
branch.
And I still sometimes am that way. But a little sweet alyssum
Yeah,
side of a bed.
nasturtiums are really great. hanging off the
Nasturtium is
bed.
so nice because eventually, if it grows well, and these tend to, it'll be a very globular sort of bush, but off the side of the bed. So it breaks the structure, especially if you have a more kind of like, I don't know, maybe more geometric looking bed, like one of our birdies beds here. It works really well and just adds a lot of beauty. You could do it with edibles, of course, as well.
Yeah, this is actually, I'm gonna actually stick on the flowers because I think more people need to grow more flowers.
Yeah.
This is another great one where I oftentimes will sneak a flower in the middle. Let's say I do try to plant a perfect thing of just broccoli here. I put those 6 plants out. They look kind of lonely. They're small. You know they're gonna grow in, but it's so tempting to see that space and utilize it, and I often do. So for example, if I have cabbages and I know they're gonna be sitting like only like a foot off the ground, I'll go ahead and put like a straw flower that's gonna grow maybe 2 to 4 feet high and sit above the cabbages, give me that beauty. And once I harvest out the cabbage, now the bed isn't empty. It still has the straw flower. I can plant around it. Really no loss there.
That's a clever way to think about it. It's almost like the ghost method. Like you're leaving something behind afterwards to kind of haunt the bed.
Exactly.
We'll come up with some fun names for this, but all this being said, it's really just getting super creative. I find that the smaller the space, the more you're forced.
Exactly.
The more you're forced. Like back in my old garden, which was even smaller than what you see right here, it was really cramped. It was probably 10 by 20
That was
feet.
a tight space.
Tight space, 10 raised beds. I had in between the beds, which were only a foot apart, I had containers. And so I think back then, if I even utilized some of these strategies, I would have crammed even more yield or harvest or beauty out of that one space. So many creative ideas for the spring. Hopefully some of these inspired you. If you're looking for more info on what we do here at Epic Gardening, our whole goal, we exist to help you grow, to take you from where Jacques and I both were, and many people who are on our team, knowing nothing about plants, to being able to feed, provide for your family, feed your friends, have a beautiful space. And we do that in a lot of different ways. You can check our YouTube videos out. If you want to get some seeds, we own a seed company. It's called Botanical Interests. You can find it at 5,000 nurseries around the country or at our store, botanicalinterests.com. And if you like the look of these sexy metal beds or some of our seed starting trays or grow bags or other sort of hard goods supplies, you can check that out as well at shop.epicgardening.com. We've got a lot of stuff for you, so we're excited for this season, and we hope you have a great, great growing season this year. Good luck in the garden, and keep on growing.
Well, hey everyone, we're
Hey.
Sean and Allison from Spoken Garden, and thank you for being here at the 5th annual Great Grow Along. It's great to have you here.
I know we're so excited. This is the last session of the day. We've saved the best for last year. We've got Jacques and Kevin we're going to talk to in just a sec.
Epic Garden.
Cannot wait to talk to these guys. Yeah, we're just excited to be here.
And we want to say a really big shout out to Epic Gardening for being the title sponsor for the Great Grow Along this year. Yeah, thank you so much. Very cool.
And in addition to that, we have some other wonderful sponsors to shout out to. We've got Element. If you haven't tried Element yet, you've got to get your hands on some of this stuff. Nature's Willow, also amazing product, and Cool Springs Press.
Definitely.
So
And there's
thank you.
and there's a lot of other sponsors for the Great Grow Along too. So show all of them some love. Click through on the links. Get there, see all, and look at all those great products.
Absolutely.
So yeah. So with that,
Hey guys,
yeah. Hey, Jacques. Hey, Kevin.
how are you?
Hey.
Where are you?
Yeah, where are you guys?
We're currently in the hotel room at the Philadelphia Flower Show. So we just did a little live event there, a little Q&A, garden starting, and now we're excited to answer any questions here.
That's
Awesome,
great.
guys.
Yeah.
So Philly, yeah. How's the show like? What's the show
It's
like?
big. It's big. I mean, we just came back a couple weeks ago from the Seattle show, and I think is a third of the size. So it's a lot bigger out here, but it's more flower focused instead of vegetables. But it's a cool mix.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's been interesting to just see how many people are here, and just to see like some of the display gardens are like more artistic, more unique. It's been pretty fun.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, we've never been to that show. We'll have to head out there someday.
Someday.
Yeah.
Opposite coast.
But we've got some really good questions for you. So let's jump in here.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so starting with Erica in the chat. So Kevin, it starts off. I watched your session last weekend. I'm curious, did you cut anything from previous years to make room for new? I personally get a bit tired of growing potatoes, not sure why.
Yeah, I will say to Erica that I did not cut potatoes. I, in fact, increased my potatoes, but there's a very special reason for that I'm not going to reveal yet. But let's just say a certain challenge from the past might be coming back on the channel. But I did cut, let's see. I would say this year I expanded my tomatoes, peppers, but I cut some other stuff like my eggplants.
Summer squash for sure.
Yeah, my summer squash is cut down significantly because I think we planted about 20 of them last year. That's just too much. That's too much for,
Yeah.
that's almost enough for like a small town, We know that as gardeners. So I cut that down, and I think that's probably the only thing. My eggplants are a little cut down as well. Every year, and I've mentioned this a lot on the channel as well as even talks, I go up and down in my production. It just depends on the crop. So this year it's a big tomato peppers. Next year I'm sure it won't be.
Okay.
Awesome.
No, that's really fun. You got to mix it up too,
Yeah,
right?
right.
You know what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next up is Will. Doesn't lettuce bolt from heat, not just the sun? I'm in Chicago.
Yeah, so lettuce will bolt when it gets too hot, especially if it doesn't get like if it dries out, if it gets any amount of overheating and drought stress, then that will trigger it to bolt and or taste bitter anyway. So it's effectively near bolting because it's going to be very bitter lettuce. So that's why we like to plant it in more shaded regions, like say behind taller plants or something like that, just to keep. When we say keep the light off, the light is also helping to keep the temperature down to some degree.
Yeah.
But if it's like 90 degrees outside, it's 90 degrees.
Right.
So like that's hard to avoid.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great.
Okay, Amy in the chat asks, what vegetables will grow in the shade?
It's a surprising amount, I think. When you think about veggies that want to grow, a lot of the ones we eat we don't eat the flowering part of it. So they're just generally not going through their full life cycle. Like the question we just asked about lettuce, bolting is actually part of lettuce's life cycle. Of course, we don't eat it at that phase. And so you could think of things like leafy greens as plants you really you're eating them like at their halfway point almost. And you're not eating the parts of the plant that are a little more complex, take a little more energy. So any leafy greens, I've had success even with something like potatoes in the shade, because it's going to be a slower process, but it will end up working. You can do most root crops in the shade, again, slower, but works. I don't know, Jacques, what do you got?
I think that's pretty much it. Like fruiting plants are going to be challenging, especially like tomatoes and peppers, also like cucumbers, but anything that is a leafy green that doesn't produce a fruit tends to be able to handle more shade and still will do well. But just like Kevin mentioned, it will grow slower, so just keep that expectation in mind. Other things like some herbs like mint, parsley, those will do great in shade.
Cilantro.
Yeah. So, and actually cilantro also doesn't like the heat. So even that one actually does better in the shade.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Great advice. Monica wanted to ask, could you elaborate what plants are good for the multi-seed approach? Even big ones or just beets or such? Lettuce or herbs?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, and Jacques, I know you have your techniques as well. The multi-sow approach is something I took directly from Charles Dowding. So all credit to Charles. When I was out in his garden, I kind of saw him go through it. But he'll use beets for it, and beets is a unique one because the seed itself has multiple beet seeds within it. So I don't know what the actual beet seed that you plant is even called because
Yeah,
the
it's like
seeds are actually
multi-seeded,
within
I
that.
think.
But anyways, that works really well. I would say radish, I would say turnip, I would say even small bulbing onions, like little
Oh yeah.
cooking onions, like a Cipollini style onion, that
Yeah.
could work really well. Bunching onions, obviously, it's in the name. Those are some I think. I also think, and this is a little bit of an out there one. I'm curious what you think, Jacques, is your leafy greens. I think if you are eating them at baby stage,
Mm.
I think multi-sow or just planting them in almost a scattershot method is fine because they're not getting to the point where they'd crowd themselves out.
Yeah, another one that's a classic would be like leeks. They tend to do really well multi-sown. I will actually multi-sow a lot. Like I guess it's technically multi-sowing. A lot of my spring planting, like even my tomatoes, I'll start off in a transplant container with multiple seeds in each cell, and then I will split them out. So I'm not like truly multi-sowing, like I'm not planting all three tomatoes, but I will start them all in one just to save space. Actually, I will add on, I have accidentally grown lettuce is multi-sown. Just this past week, I harvested it because I didn't realize that there were a couple other seedlings hiding, and it was butter lettuce. So I got all ruffly, and you couldn't tell which one was which. And I ended up harvesting like three smaller heads that looked like one giant head, and that actually worked out just fine. I had a lot of baby lettuce
Yeah.
leaves, and that was
Yeah.
actually quite nice.
Works.
We got more lettuce.
I
Cool.
know the seeds
Yeah,
are so
yeah.
tiny, so it's
Tender too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds so good.
Nice.
All right, where are we? Let's see.
I think Linda.
Kimberly.
Kimberly, yeah.
There's a few. Okay. Kimberly asked, do you plant everything from seed?
Mm. I would say these days it's close, but never 100%.
Yeah, I can't say that.
Never 100%. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, sometimes your timing just off. Like we're out here at the Philly Flower Show right now. Maybe I forgot to start my peppers or something, and there's one that I just don't really have the seed for at the time. I'm going to go grab that at the nursery, no problems. There's some plants that
Herbs, I usually just buy them as starts, like lemon thyme or like a rosemary. I'll start things that are easier, like the basil from seed, but a lot of those herbs like thyme and rosemary and all those, even sage can be pretty easy, but
Yeah.
mostly like stuff like thyme.
I
It
actually
takes
think
so long
I
to
don't think I've
germinate.
ever started rosemary from a seed. I don't know. I mean, for the botanical curiosity, I think it'd be
Yeah.
interesting, but I don't know for practicality if it's really worth it. you
Yeah,
know?
because I've done the time and it's like literally like you can't even see how small it is and it takes months to size up.
Mhm.
The other time I'll buy stuff is just recently. I was all excited. I had all these broccolini plants, and then I come out to the garden and a raccoon had dug up all of my seedlings looking for grubs,
no.
and the seedlings were out, like out of the ground, wilted and sad. And I was
Oh.
like, I can't start new broccoli seeds right now. It'll take 2 months by the time they reach this size. So that's the point where I'll be like, you know what? I'll go to a nursery, see what they have. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to replace it. But in general, yeah, we do like to start from seed to control the varieties. And also, like, I don't know about you, but I feel like starting from seed keeps your garden a little less disease free. You're less likely to
Mhm.
bring in pests or disease on transplants.
I also
But
find
that kind of a-
you're also more plugged into the timeliness of all
Yeah.
things in the garden. If you're starting seeds regularly, to me, you have a bit more of a connection to the season.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that. That's
definitely.
a good point.
Yeah. So
Okay.
Linda wanted to ask, is it worth growing corn versus store ones? Tomatoes always, potatoes sometimes, in my opinion.
Okay, I think I understand what
Yeah.
we're going at there.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, this is my take. If it's worth it to you for whatever your reasons are, it's worth it to you. So actually, Jacques for a while wasn't really into
Yeah.
growing
I
potatoes
thought it was a waste of time.
or onions. And he's come around on both. And I would say for me, corn became worth it the second I was on what's called a vegetable trial tour, where you go and visit different breeders and you can taste, new varieties. And I had eaten some super sweet corn out of the field in August, right? So straight raw corn, raw sweet corn. And I was like, okay, well, this for me now is always going to be part of my garden. I actually want to bring back the corn maze this year.
Yeah,
I think that'd be really
that
fun.
would
But
be fun.
yeah, to me, it's anything is worth it if you want to eat it. Now, the other answer to that question is like kind of the cost and practicality of it. It is true, potatoes are cheap, onions are cheap,
Mhm.
corn
Can be
Corn
for
can-
the
can
space
be.
it takes, it's definitely say cheaper to
It's
just buy.
probably cheaper to buy. But to me, that's not why we
Yeah.
grow, right? We grow to connect to the earth and to have the satisfaction of the harvest. I can't put a price on eating my own corn compared to buying one just because it's monetarily cheaper.
Yeah, and for me, like there are things that I do think save you money, like tomatoes for sure. And the taste is another level.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that, but I do grow for flavor primarily. So like when I had a potato and I think onions from his garden, I was like, oh, these actually taste better. And I don't know why I'm still surprised, but everything that comes out of the garden just tastes better. The onions are so sweet. The potatoes are more complex. There's more varieties. And the corn, you just can't match it because as soon as you pick the corn off the plant, the sugars start degrading into starches. So you're never going to get as sweet of a corn as that perfect field ripened corn that you get in your garden. It's really like it's like an experience and the flavor that really makes it
100%.
worth it to me.
Oh, definitely.
That's so true. I totally can relate to that, Jacques, because I never used to like onions. I was, taking them out of all my food. And once we started growing them, I was like hooked.
Well,
Yeah, no, they're so
good.
sweet and
Oh,
delicious.
love them.
It's something like silky about them.
Yeah.
I started
Totally
asking her,
calm
can we
right
have
now.
onions? Can we put them in?
I mean, now I have them in everything. I can't
I've
imagine
always
not
loved
having
onions.
them.
I always loved
Didn't like them before.
Yeah.
Okay, so this next question is kind of long. It's a great question. It's just kind of multi-part. So I'm gonna. Okay, so Shauna K asks, in a container garden, if you're using the 2 seeds in 1 hole method, say with the pepper as an example, do you need to plant in a container big enough for 1 plant or 2 plants? So that's question 1.
Okay. Well, hit question 1 first. So
Okay.
what she's referencing is, I think, something, I don't think we're the only people to say this, but I will at least often say plant 2 seeds in a hole. So you basically guarantee germination, and it's just simple sort of math. It's if you have a 90% germination rate, 9 times out of 10 it sprouts, 1 time out of 10 it doesn't. If you plant 2 in the same hole, it'll be 99 times out of 100 you get something to sprout.
Yeah.
So it just increases your reliability a lot. That doesn't mean that you want both to sprout over the course of the whole growing season, though. So to answer her question, I would be planting them in a pot for 1 pepper plant because I will be selecting the better of the 2 and thinning off the worst one because it did its job, basically. It guaranteed that I got something to sprout.
Okay, that makes sense. So then she goes on to ask, so how close can you plant companion plants? Should you use the spacing for 1 plant or 2 plants? So that's the second part. Oh, I guess, and it says, essentially, what spacing concerns do you need to adjust?
So then following from the first answer, you effectively don't need to adjust the spacing because you will have planted peppers or tomatoes or right, unless we're talking about multi-sown like we just did a couple questions ago. If you're going to be growing a plant that wants to be 1 per at the end state, then you don't have to adjust your companion spacing at all. You would space it as you normally would. But I will say, and you might have a little more to say on this, is you generally can space a lot tighter than most people think.
Yeah, I'd say spacing rules are there for a ideal guideline. Like they're going to be the most surefire, successful way. But if you plant things closer together, you could definitely do that. You just have to adjust your watering, your fertility, things like that. You might get a smaller, like individual harvest from that 1 plant, but you could definitely cramp things together. I will put like a pepper in a pot, like even like a 10 5-gallon pot, and I'll put a small companion plant like a marigold on the edge, and it always does fine.
Awesome.
No, that's great. Yeah. So Kristen wanted to say, no question, just wanted to express my gratitude for all the great content you all both put out. This will be my first season having a garden in Zone 6A.
That's exciting.
You played a huge role in helping me dive into this. Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, we love to hear that. That's like what really brings us fulfillment and joy is to hear you guys succeed and learn how to garden. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Looks like Shauna's got another question as well, huh?
Yeah. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, Shauna. Yep, right there.
Okay, so follow up. I was referencing the example that you used with planting 2 varieties of peppers right next to each other. Sorry.
Oh, yes. Okay. So we'll explain that then. So what Shauna was sort of getting at, this is something that we tried last year in the garden. I would say it worked.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm like super sold on the method, but basically it would be to, let's say you're growing a classic California Wonder bell pepper. Instead of growing 1 pepper, you grow 2, let's say 3 inches apart. And One theory is that even though peppers are perfect flowers, so they don't need pollination necessarily from flower to flower, the proximity of having more flowers closer increases the set of the pepper. I don't know that we even paid enough attention to know if that happened for sure, but it makes sense that it would work.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, I'm not very sold on that being a method that needs to happen. I think it's fine if you do it. I would say maybe if you're in smaller space gardens.
Yeah.
I took a couple questions at the show today from people with, 2 5x3 garden beds, right? In that case, I might actually try that method because I'm really trying to squeeze as much as I can out of everything on a per square foot basis. But to me, that method was more of a fun experiment. I don't know that I would like say it's a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, for me, I will probably continue something similar to it. The main benefit that I got from doing it is that peppers actually prefer a little bit of shade. And so by putting your peppers close together like that, they could help shade out the fruit from getting sun scalded and issues like that. So that's kind of like one of the other benefits. You maybe will get bigger yield by having the flowers close to each other. But even just having that extra canopy and shade on the fruit should protect them from getting scalded.
Yeah. We did just run, Sean and Allison. You guys might find this interesting. We just finished up a spacing experiment that'll come out on the channel soon, where we grew cabbage at the classic sort of 24-inch spacing. We did 18 and then we did 12. So fully half the spacing. And we found that, and this is really important for those of you listening who have smaller gardens, and it really proves out this fact that you don't have to respect the back of the packet spacing as much as you might think, is basically the 24-inch spacing, which is the traditional, had the highest weight per cabbage of anything, as you might expect, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But when you got down to the 12-inch spacing, which is half the recommended, we could fit double the cabbage in the same length row. So there you go. It was probably about 400 grams less weight per cabbage, but the total mass was over double. So on a raw, like what you got out of the garden level, you got way more cabbage material out of the garden. The only thing I'll say to that is, those of you listening, what that means is, yeah, you're cramming and you're getting more space, or you're getting more yield out. That also means you're taking more from that soil.
Right.
So if you're going to grow that close together, you really have to think about adding in fertility back very much more than you would in a normal situation.
Yeah, and you'll have to water more too because they're now right next to each other.
Yeah.
But it is worth it.
That's interesting.
That's
We
fun.
never
Yeah.
follow the
Yeah.
spacing. I know it's worth it. It's worth the experiment for sure.
Everyone ignores the back of the packet. Let's be
Yeah.
honest.
We teach it, but we don't follow it. But
So Pat R wanted to just say, hey, has a suggestion for next year. You need a session next year on perennial vegetables, maybe like walking onions, like walking onions, 9-star cauliflower, sorrel. Also a session on home mushroom growing. Ooh.
Oh,
You know what?
That'd be interesting. I have 9-star growing in my garden.
Do you?
I have sorrel and I've grown mushrooms. So
Hey,
And I've got walking
you
onion.
got walking onions.
okay, whoa,
Hey,
what's
well,
walking onion?
yeah,
I don't know what that is.
I don't know if I've heard of
So walking onion it's a variety, it's a cultivar that it will grow, it grows and then it falls over. And then the seed or bulb, or I forgot exactly
little
what
bulbils.
part of it, bulbils will root, at the distance that it falls over. So over the years, it'll
They'll keep walking through your garden.
kind of do that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. If you let it go like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we have to grow that.
So plant it somewhere where it can just kind of do that.
Yeah, let it meander.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many perennials. I mean, I've had artichokes for years now. It's one of my favorite perennials. Asparagus I've had. Unfortunately, my asparagus is going crazy right now, finally coming up in its 3rd year, which is sort of like the year you really want to be getting it. And I'm not there to harvest it. So I'm missing my asparagus, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll do something on perennials pretty soon.
Yeah, it sounds like
Oh,
a
that's
great
cool.
idea.
That's fun, you guys.
That'd be a really fun session. I'd love to hear that. I think we just have I think we have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, related to what we were just talking about, is sunchoke. Wait, I say that right? Yeah, sunchoke a perennial vegetable.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like perennial ish because the tubers will regrow. So it's not like, I guess that's
perennial.
That's perennial.
Yeah.
It's like, you can harvest them out, but there's always going to be one left over and it will regrow. It's actually so perennial that it could become a problem. It could take over because they do spread via those tubers. So I would count that as a perennial.
I mean, in that sense, I always forget a potato or two. So in that sense, a potato is almost perennial.
That's what I mean. It's
in
like,
a non-freezing climate,
Yeah.
Getting into semantics, but
Yeah. No, it's cool. That's fun, you guys. Yeah, it's just exciting to hear all the different things you're going to be growing this year, all your different ideas, all the different methods. It's been really fun to hear about it.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah,
fun.
we have a lot of fun doing it. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, we appreciate. Yeah, again, we thank you to all the sponsors. We appreciate you guys being here, watching and asking all those great questions. Make sure to come back tomorrow, you
Yes.
guys. We have another day of the Great Grow Along. It's all about homesteading tomorrow, right?
Yep, homesteading.
Homesteading. That'll be
Yep.
fun.
And make sure definitely check out all the different sponsors. Click through on all those links. Make sure to enter the sweepstakes, the giveaway. There's 1,500 different products and prizes. So make sure to fill out the form, enter to win on either just below the video here or to the side.
All right. Yeah. And with that, you guys, thank you for your time. Have a safe flight home tomorrow and talk to you soon.
Thank you.
you.